The moment Mike sat behind the DM screen, something changed. He was not their friend. He was a tyrant with god powers and a checklist of every toxic GM behavior imaginable, and he speedran that entire checklist in record time. This is the story of how a first-time GM destroyed a decade of friendship by hitting every toxic behavior on the list: railroading, favoritism, temper tantrums, the works. So let's dive into this disaster, because trust me, it gets wild. About 2 years ago, our long-time group concluded a Vampire the Masquerade campaign, and one of the players, Mike, wanted to run the next one. Started falling apart after a few months. He started acting like a complete man-child, managed to tick pretty much everything on the toxic GM checklist other than SA. 1. Shallow railroaded plots with no player agency? Check. Mike didn't have one original bone in his body, and it showed. Most of the game felt AI generated. It was riddled with cliches and mostly derivative of video games and other people's campaigns. Each plotline was simply weeks, tedious breadcrumb trails that culminated in big plot events with no actual payoff. These always boiled down to cheap shock value, edgy gore, buildings blowing up, and major NPCs getting killed off randomly because Mike thought someone needed to die for impact. This destroyed months of player agency, and there was no payoff to anything we'd be doing for over half a year. Before long, all we had were gimmicky existential threats he found in other Worlds of Darkness games, and thought they were super cool and novel. Any attempt at deviating from his imagined flow of the story was met with brute force railroading and passive aggression. 2. Arbitrary homebrews when he didn't even know the rules? Check. Mike didn't know the rules of the game he was running, and instead of learning, he decided that every player ability was broken or overpowered as soon as it was used in a way that he didn't plan for. He'd then come up with homebrews to fix them, making powers borderline useless and unusable, or making them work only when he wanted them to, for more storytelling options, i.e. easier railroading. The highlight was him reinventing the core dice rolling mechanics specifically to increase the odds of us botching rolls because, quote, players need to fail more often to make the story more interesting.
What did he say?
Oh my god, that's a wild statement. Crafting a better story makes the story more interesting. 3. GM vs players mentality? Check. At session 0, we agreed we wanted collaborative storytelling and RP before rules, but Mike turned the game into the complete opposite. One day, his goal was suddenly to challenge the players, and the game became a classic case of, can you outsmart the GM? Stats didn't matter, and the GM was the sole arbiter of what was smart. Given that everyone else in the group was smarter than him, it went about as you expect. If you had an idea Mike didn't like, it just didn't work, and he'd condescendingly explain why. If you tried a brute force approach or Occam's razor, you were a problem player. You had to think of whatever contrived solution Mike came up with. Otherwise, you wouldn't get anywhere and would suffer in-game consequences for playing wrong. At one point, he pretty much told me I had to metagame and deliberately make stupid decisions so the story could happen. If your story relies on metagaming and railroading players into making stupid decisions that they don't want to make, don't think GMing is right for you. Or at least you're not ready for it yet. 4. Forcing PvP and secrecy? Check. Mike eventually made his girlfriend's self-insert the protagonist, turn the game into a PvP clusterfuck because she wanted to betray us and join our enemy. Not only was he metagaming to make this work, he started deliberately giving PCs conflicting goals and pushing us to lie and work against each other. He insisted that's the way the game was supposed to be played because vampires lie and use each other. Obviously that means you have to lie to other players out of character and screw them over constantly, because everyone likes investing months into a campaign only to have their choices and payoffs flushed down the toilet for the sake of brainless PvP betrayal plot twists. Session 0 be damned. 5. Targeted player abuse. Check. Mike also used the game to lash out at some people, mainly his former GM and me. He started hating me because I kept finding shortcuts through his railroaded plotlines, either via plot holes he apparently didn't see, or by using some basic power he didn't account for. After I killed one NPC, he presented as an unmanageable existential threat in the middle of a combat scene. He got mad. He couldn't admit he mishandled that particular situation, and it was downhill from there. He'd go out of his way to screw me over, forcing rolls, changing rules, fishing for gotchas, killing off my NPCs, etc. The most absurd example was when he decided my character status points didn't matter, because your reputation doesn't matter until you get people to trust you. Then he used those same status points to make half the setting hate me for being too successful. Couldn't make up this kind of stupid if I tried. 6. Blaming all his fuck-ups on others and ignoring feedback. Check. We tried to talk things out several times, but Mike either ignored feedback or did the literal opposite of what people suggested. He took it all as a personal insult since his bloated ego couldn't accept any form of criticism. If he did something wrong and had to face it, he'd go through some sequence of the following excuses. People are overreacting, it's not a big deal. Oh, you just misunderstood my intention. Well, it was actually someone else's idea. What I did wasn't really wrong, accompanied by elaborate mental gymnastics. His final card was always to play the victim to avoid accountability, and if none of this worked, discussion would end with him throwing a tantrum, lashing out, or blaming you for not trusting him, while literally giving you all the reasons not to trust him. Ultimately, anyone who disagreed with him simply had incompatible opinions and had to go. When the game fell apart, he ended it by forcing us to play the victims in his girlfriend's self-insert power fantasy and burning bridges with friends he knew for years, but that's a horror story of its own. You know, some people are just not cut out to be GMs, and this guy definitely one of them. This story should be mandatory reading for anybody who wants to be a GM for the first time. Basically a what not to do. Have you ever encountered a bad GM like this? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.